What is up, FTN? Welcome in. It's Tuesday. You know what that means. It's the Dream Stream. And today, at least for two of us, sorry we left you out, Kyle.
Yeah, appreciate that.
It's the Bean Stream. Not official FTN merch, but maybe we need to talk to the powers that be about getting some Bean Stream branded t-shirts. My name's Zac Graham, aka Kawaisenberg, DFS. Alongside my two Dream Stream buddies, Joe Metz and Kyle Murray. Joe, looking sharp in the Bean shirt. How you doing?
Nice, comfy. I think it's the polyester cotton blend, so it's nice. Yeah, we have plenty of time for 3 games. The Seth Curry news obviously just came out, so we should have time to run pretty in-depth for all these games. I'm looking forward to a rather ugly slate.
Kyle, 3 games and an hour to break it down. Kind of maybe the shortest slate we've had through 3 weeks of the NBA season. How you feeling about it?
I'm not a big fan of 3-game slates. I'm not gonna lie. Like, if you are on the edge about it, I wouldn't push you onto the edge of playing the slate. Just because I don't think that 3-game slates are that much fun for me personally. I do prefer the bigger slates, but hey, I'm gonna play it because that's what I do. I play all the slates as much as I can, so I will be playing it. I will say though, with the whole Bean shirt, I feel like that I'm stuck outside in the cold, my hands on the window, just waiting to be let in. You guys are cozy by the fireplace, and I'm just an outcast.
Well, we'll get you a Bean shirt, and I guess anybody in the chat, I see some some good.
Looks like everyone wants the Bean shirts, yeah.
Yeah, if you want the link, slide into those DMs. But yeah, like we said, 3 games, plenty of time to break it down, and some timely news. I honestly wish that news would have held off a little longer, but Seth Curry will be out for the Philadelphia 76ers tonight, who are even more shorthanded, at least on the surface. We need to dive into Doc Rivers' comments last night about expanding this rotation, and hopefully he can give us some more insight in his pregame availability, which should be happening right about now. So if anybody scrolling the Twitterverse sees some Doc Rivers comments, please dump them in the FTN NBA Discord, and I will do the same. But we'll start with that Milwaukee at Philadelphia game, and let's start on let's start on the Milwaukee side, because I think there's a lot of conversation to be had specifically around 3 of these Bucks players. All 3 that got 10s in the rankings today, at least as it stands now. Losing, I think, 5 of 6, Joe. Maybe you would have better memory about all these losses piling up for the Bucks than I would. So how are you approaching your Bucks today?
Well, one, I'd rather lose in November than in June, so I'm okay right now. But wow. I think I don't necessarily think Giannis is a big, question mark on today's slate. I think the vast majority of people are going to get there. People are debating. I think a lot of the people debating between him and Paul George will probably default to playing both just because of all the value on the slate. But I think what you do with the Bucks depends largely on how you're scripting this game, because a player like Drew Holiday is very appealing at his price, but given the fact that he's still getting up to speed from COVID, it's his 3rd game back, assuming he starts 2nd game in the starting lineup, this game gets out of hand. You got to think someone like him is going to be one of the first people pulled, or someone like Bobby Portis, who I'm very high on today, but you can make a similar argument. He's coming back from a soft tissue injury. If they're going to pull people from this game, he might be more likely to be pulled than someone like a Grayson Allen, someone like a Jordan Nwora, who the latter, Nwora, probably benefits from a blowout. So I think the Bucks come down to how you script this game. But for me, I'm having it's 3 games. I get the Paul George love. If I'm playing one of them, it's probably Giannis.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that people are shocked by that, Joe. But I don't necessarily differ. I think I mentioned 3 guys in the rankings picking up a 10 on DraftKings for the Bucks, and that is Giannis, Drew, and Bobby Portis. I think I would probably only want to play 2 of the 3, certainly if I'm only running one lineup. And believe it or not, I think that the one I would leave out would be Giannis, because you are paying that premium for him today. It's not because I don't like him. I want Andre Drummond in one lineup, and I want exposure to those Bucks guys. So I think it gives you more flexibility. You can drop down to Paul George with a similar ceiling. I don't know if it's quite as high as Giannis's, still with Middleton and Brook Lopez out. But Kyle, how are you approaching the top end of this Bucks team?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think Giannis is the spend up option if you are doing so. I think that if you want to get real sneaky, or I guess try to maybe be a little bit living on the edge, maybe getting both Paul George and Giannis in there could be something that you could toy around with. I think that there are some builds that make it possible, and not necessarily pretty, but I think that could potentially help you be a little bit unique on a small slate. I think the best way to be unique on today's slate is to either go super stars and scrubs or go super balanced build. I think a lot of people will try to get one of George or Giannis in, and that'll kind of leave those builds kind of falling in line with a lot of the others. But yeah, I think if I had to pick between one, I do think Giannis. I prefer Giannis. I just think the ceiling's a bit higher, but from a per dollar basis, I think Paul George is just fine. I like the matchup for him a little bit more. So no problem with either one, but I would prefer Giannis.
So looking at the rest of this Bucks team, we touched on Grayson Allen a little bit. Kind of interesting that his minutes and fantasy points have trended up in the 2 games that Drew Holiday has returned to this rotation. Obviously, only one of those games in the starting lineup, but 31 and 34 minutes in the last 2 games. So sitting at 5-1, he's guard forward eligible. I think that's interesting. A guy like Pat Connaughton, I think with Bobby Portis getting back, playing 30-plus minutes now, it's going to limit his upside just a little bit. Taking away the massive minutes upside we saw, Pat Connaughton averaging nearly 30 minutes on the year because of all the absences for this Bucks team. And we saw George Hill, I think, remained in the starting lineup last game alongside Grayson Allen and Drew Holiday. So any interest in some of these, more value type guys for you, Kyle?
So I think if you're not playing Giannis, I think you should have some interest in some of these mid-tier guys, just because on a 3-game slate, you have to assume that there's going to be some producers from each team, right? Like on an 8 or 9 game slate, you don't necessarily need to think like that. But if you're assuming that Giannis isn't going to produce, or if you're building lineups around the scenario that he's not going to have a big game, someone from Milwaukee has to score, has to produce. And it's on a 3-game slate, that's probably going to be a good spot. So Drew Holiday would be someone that I think would be benefited by a bad Giannis game. Bobby Portis, same deal. Grayson Allen has been shooting the absolute piss out of the ball. That guy is not missing right now. No problem with him either. He is getting priced up to a bit where I don't necessarily think he's overpriced to a point where you don't love him on a 3-game slate. I think maybe on a full slate I wouldn't like him, but I do think the ownership will be down on him a bit because of the higher price tag. If Hill starts again, I think he's in play as a value option as well. I feel like George Hill is on literally every single 2 or 3 game slate that I've ever played in my entire life, and I always play George Hill. So for whatever reason, he's always here on these short slates. So if he starts again, I don't hate him on DraftKings where he's at, I believe, 3,600. I think he's a fine value there.
Joe, are you kind of in lockstep with Kyle on these Bucks value guys?
Yeah, I am. I think Jordan Noir, again, it comes back to script. I think Jordan Noir is a really enticing play, especially ownership should not be there, even on a 3-game slate, especially since Bobby Portis came back. It's really cut into the minutes in production. But again, if this game gets out of hand, which I don't want to like jinx anything, but I don't know how the Sixers cover a 5.5, 6-point spread right now. I really don't. If that game does get out of hand within 3 quarters, he could potentially play the entire 4th quarter, which would be in addition to probably 2.5, maybe 3 rotations prior. He could get up to 25, 28 minutes in a blowout. So I think if you're scripting that way, I think Noira is actually a target of mine who I don't expect to come in with very high ownership, especially with others on the slate. But I tend to agree with Kyle. I like George Hill if he starts. Grayson Allen, fine on a 3-game slate, but I don't want to say he's priced at his ceiling because he has, like Kyle said, been shooting lights out. But at some point, if you expect that efficiency to come down, then you're uncomfortable with his price. So as of right now, it's Giannis, Bobby Portis, and like you said, Drew Holiday if I'm not playing Giannis. And then I would probably default to George Hill and Jordan Noir.
Yeah, I don't think I differ too much from that. So let's flip to the Philadelphia side, where I think, a lot of those guys we just talked about will be overlooked because a lot of these Philly guys that are active tonight are in that price range. I guess we can start at the top, though. Andre Drummond coming up in price and multiplier being lowered on SuperDraft, 7.7K. Obviously center only on DraftKings, although depending on, how the DraftKings or Fanduel interns are doing that day, that's not always a guarantee. 1.2x on SuperDraft for Andre Drummond. He still gets double tens in the ranks today. We had some discussion in the FTN Discord mid-afternoon, kind of talking out, do we think Andre Drummond's going to be limited at all? Are we worried about the back-to-back for him? Me personally, I'm not. Mainly, I don't think he's been a guy that's been, particularly load managed throughout his career, whether it was Detroit, Cleveland, Los Angeles. Those first two, not really the model franchises in the NBA. But it's also about his standing with this Philadelphia team. He's on almost a minimum contract. It's a 1-year deal. He's their backup center. I don't think they have too many concerns about limiting his minutes. So it's really just the blowout. And even then, I think Andre Drummond plays through 3 quarters and can get on top of this price tag on all the sites. So, Joe, how are you treating Drummond kind of on our third go-round with Andre Drummond night?
No, I just said in the Discord, responding to Triple H, he's still $2,000 too cheap. Like people have a lot of people in the industry must have short-term memory loss when it comes to Andre Drummond. Like it was a season and a half, 2 seasons ago when he was $9K, push at times 5 digits for Detroit and for Cleveland. I mean, he's an elite per minute producer. He's quite literally producing at almost 2 fantasy points per minute. Like per minute production is rivaling. If you look at this slate, it's him and Giannis for per minute production right now. So I will gladly take him on this slate. It's being a 3-game slate. He's obviously going to be arguably the most popular player on the slate, but I also think he's going to be lower owned than he should be. So I am, if I'm playing, quite honestly, if I'm playing 150 lineups, I'm probably going 150 Andre Drummond.
Yeah, I don't think I have any issue with that. It's kind of still like if Andre Drummond fails and the 15% of people that don't play him, I guess that number could be larger today with the increase in price. But if that's how I'm going to get beat because Andre Drummond fails tonight, I think I would be okay with that. But Kyle, how are you treating Drummond with his price rising?
He's still projecting as one of the best point per dollar plays for me on the slate, and that's with him, being 7,700 on DraftKings, 7,200 on Fanduel. I don't think he'll be as popular today as he was yesterday because of the price, but I still think he will be very popular. And I think he's a great play on both sides. No issue with it. I think the site where it might have gotten a little bit more murky if you wanted to potentially consider pivoting is Fanduel because of the center eligibility there where, but my issue is there's just not really that many great center plays. Like all the other guys, I just have them projecting much better than. I still think I don't think he's as smash of a play as last night because of the price is $2,000 more, but I still think he's a great play. He's still projecting as the 3rd best play on the board for me tonight. So he's in a spot where I don't really love any other plays in that price range or in that position compared to him. So I'm probably going to be pretty similar to Joe, right? I do think it'd be tough for me to build a lineup without Drummond.
Yeah, I think the tough decision and what's probably going to determine the winners of all the tournaments tonight is the rest of this Philadelphia team. And we saw a couple tweets coming in. I think older, maybe this afternoon / last night after Philadelphia's front end of the back-to-back, talking about running a 10-man rotation. And with Seth Curry out, they do have 10 guys active on the bench. So the 7 that we've been accustomed to over the last couple games, Drummond, Tyrese Maxey, Shake Milton, Furkan Korkmaz, Georges Niang, Danny Green, and Paul Reed. And then 3 young guys, Charles Bassey, Jaden Springer, and Aaron Henry will be active tonight. And I think we need to expect those guys to at least get a rotation in each half if Doc is truly going to play a 10-man rotation. So, Kyle, I'll stick with you. Let's just start with the guys we're more familiar with who have been playing for this team. What are you targeting out of these guys who are all priced kind of crunched in together in about a $1,500 span on DraftKings?
So I talked about this on the Optimal show today where if you were building lineups like in a 150 basis where I probably would look to limit how many I'm using because I just think a lot of them do the same thing, right? Like Danny Green, Niang, Korkmaz, those 3 specifically. I guess Milton's a little bit different, but I do think his minutes are kind of intertwined with some of those guys. But specifically Green, Niang, and Korkmaz, they all are kind of going to be perimeter shooters, kind of eat the same kind of minutes. And if one gets going, I think that's kind of the one that you want. So I would probably look to limit having any more than maybe 2 of those guys, definitely not 3. Korkmaz is my favorite. He's the most expensive of those 3, but definitely my favorite. On FanDuel, he's 5,400. So the price is up a bit more over there, and he's going to be popular. So if you want to make a pivot, I would prefer to do it on that site. On DraftKings, still under 5K, and he's going to be benefiting from that 3-point bonus. So I like him a pretty good amount. I think a lot of it does depend on the starting lineup, though. And also if we do get any news about Springer or Henry or Bassey, if they're going to factor in. I have them in the rotation a bit. Henry and Springer more so. Bassey, I've given like 5 minutes. But like if we get Paul Reed starting, I think he's definitely in play. I think you can play him even if he isn't starting. I have him at about 20 minutes. And then if he ends up in the starting lineup, I think that'll only be a boost to him. But it does seem like they want to keep Niang and Korkmaz off the bench. And that's why they started him the other night when Danny Green was out. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Reed start again tonight.
Yeah, so I think Paul Reed for me is the one guy in this starting five that we should get here pretty soon. That is really a turning point for me in how I want to attack this Philadelphia team. We talked about Adam and I talked about last night when he was out of the starting lineup that I had a lot of trepidation going to a decently owned Paul Reed coming off the bench because I think Doc Rivers has shown nothing but disdain, I guess, for lack of a better term, in giving Paul Reed minutes. I think his high on the year's like 15 or 19 or something like that. And this is a team that has been shorthanded pretty much since we started. 22 minutes, I'm mistaken, 22 minutes against Chicago 2 games ago in that start. So if he does start, I have a lot of interest and he'll get a nice boost in the rankings. But sitting at a 7 right now, because I think we could see him really kind of get rug pulled with his minutes again. Probably not 5. But I just don't know at high ownership if he's somebody I want to attack off the bench. Joe, how are you treating all those Philly guys? And start with Paul Reed.
I like Paul Reed. Again, if you're scripting for a blowout, I think it makes sense. But people mention the Discord, and it's not necessarily wrong. Like Doc is very hesitant to play Paul Reed. I don't necessarily know what it is, but he just doesn't necessarily play as much as we would DFS players hope him to. I think it's actually much more likely that Shake Milton goes in the starting lineup for Seth Curry than Korkmaz, than Paul Reed. Just to address like what's going on in the Discord right now, people debating whether to fade Andre Drummond or not. I don't agree with the take that he's trade bait. I know he's one of the best centers in the backup centers in the NBA, but like when you're one of the best backup centers in the NBA and you're backing up Joel Embiid, the team can't afford to trade you because you're backing up one of the most oft injured players in the NBA that can't play 38 minutes a game. And again, like you don't have to love his outlook. Like he's not going to get 40 minutes. No one's saying that. He's not going to get 38 minutes. The point is they have 7-8 guys capable of producing on a basketball court right now. Like between lack of depth and the fact that like his permanent production is second to only Giannis on this slate, you're getting a $3K discount right now. It just seems like a no-brainer play to me. But outside of Paul Reed, I think Danny Green and Shake Milton are my 2 favorite values on Philly. Furkan's up there, but his price obviously climbing a bit. On DraftKings, I like Shake for the discount off of Maxey. Maxey's going to be obviously starting at point guard, probably dealing with Drew Holiday quite a bit. And again, I don't put a ton of weight on individual matchups in the regular season, but when you are a young point guard coming in, playing 40 minutes in almost 3 straight games, Doc Rivers has said you are tired, and you're going up against arguably the best on-ball defender in basketball. It does scare me a little bit. That's one that scares me. So I would prefer to defer to Shake, who up to $1,000 cheaper, I believe, on DraftKings. We've seen him produce, like Herm said, if he gets the minutes, he produces. Furkan shooting the lights out right now. He's shooting 43% from 3 this year. I don't necessarily think that's as unsustainable as people think it is. But I think the games where he's shooting 50 to 55% from 3 are unsustainable. But the point is, like, don't underestimate the amount of shots there are to go around in this offense right now. Like, people are going to just waltz into production. You don't have to think they're good players if they're on the court for 30 to 40 minutes with no one else to shoot. Like, they have no choice but to produce. Even if it's a blowout, they score 95 points. Where are those points coming from? I just don't want people to galaxy brain themselves out of some of the obvious value on this slate.
Yeah, and for me, like, I think with Springer and Aaron Henry potentially coming into the rotation or expected to come into the rotation, those guys, for me, affect guys like Korkmaz, Niang, maybe even Danny Green a little bit more than they affect guys like Tyrese Maxey and Shake Milton, because neither of those guys that I mentioned are point guards. So you're going to get massive minutes out of Maxey again, in my opinion. I think Shake Milton gets an uptick with Seth Curry out. So it's kind of salt to taste, as I like to say, Joe. With those two guards, you're saving 1,000 with Shake Milton, but definitely possible that he comes off the bench again. So I think we should loop back around on Philly after we get this lineup here shortly, and we can go ahead and move on to Atlanta at Utah, which is a matchup that we've already seen this season, and we saw it without Donovan Mitchell. That was the one game he sat out with that ankle injury, and Utah took care of the Hawks in blowout fashion, and I believe that game was on the road. So now Atlanta traveling to Utah. How are you treating this game? It's tough to completely stay away from a game completely on a 3-game slate. But I think this, certainly on the Atlanta side, absent the news we're waiting on, tough to target those guys. How are you approaching the Hawks?
So I don't necessarily love a lot of the Hawks, but I mean, I do feel that there is some good contrarian upside in this game. It is the game with the highest implied game total on the board, but it's not really matching up that way in terms of popularity. I think some of the Utah guys are getting there up in terms of ownership. Like right now, I have Bogdanovich projecting as the most popular play on DraftKings for Utah. Like Donovan Mitchell's 22%. I think that's super interesting on a short slate. I mean, I don't necessarily think he has like the raw upside that Giannis and Paul George have. But if we see a night where Paul George or Giannis don't really have that, 65, 70-point game in them, I think Donovan Mitchell can go out there and put up 55, 60. So I think that he has the upside here. Atlanta has been a good matchup for opposing teams this year. They're top 10 in pace, bottom 3 in defensive efficiency. So no problem with the environment on the Utah side. So Donovan Mitchell's probably one of my favorite contrarian plays. I mean, he won't be super contrarian. He'll still be like 20% on DraftKings, and I have him at about 32% on Fanduel. But still, I mean, compared to some other plays on the board, that's not too high. I think Gobert and Conley will be pretty contrarian as well, both under 15, 20% on both sites. Ingles is a value play I don't mind using on Fanduel, where he's 4,400. I know he hasn't been as good when we see Mitchell and Conley play, but I mean, I just think it's one of the better spots for a low-owned value play on the board. So I probably won't use Atlanta too much. I know I kind of bounced around. I know you asked me about Atlanta, and I jumped to Utah, but I apologize for that because I don't have the bean shirt on. But most of my interest is going to be in the Utah side, and then occasionally some players on FanDuel for Atlanta with Capella, who's just, I think, a bit too cheap. And I think this could be a spot where we see more minutes out of him. But again, it's tough to play him on FanDuel because you have Drummond there.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, and you don't need to apologize for jumping to the other side of a game again, especially since we have so much time. So Joe, obviously Utah, decent favorites here. I think 8 points last time I checked, and as Kyle mentioned, the highest over/under on this 3-game slate. So who are your priorities from this game? Feel free to go to either team.
Thank you. It must be the power of the bean shirt. At first, when I looked at this slate, I was like, I don't want any part of this game. And the more I looked at it, like you guys pointed out that it's the highest total on the slate. And I'm looking at like Atlanta's not quite the defensive unit that they were last year. And a lot of it has to do with the fact they're not running, like they were running like obnoxiously slow when Nate McMillan took over last year. They're starting to run a little bit faster this year. So obviously it leads to sloppier play. So I do like some Utah. I love the Donovan Mitchell call. He is one of my favorite plays on the slate. I'm not going to call him contrarian, but relative to the other spend ups, he is like, I'd rather play Donovan Mitchell on FanDuel and get up 700 than play CJ McCollum, where I think more ownership will lie. I'm also really drawn to Mike Conley at 6'3" on FanDuel. I saw he graded out pretty well in your player rater, Kyle. And 6'3", like with Donovan Mitchell in, he's not going to have that 50-point true ceiling where we're expecting like a 25-10 double-double. But at the end of the day, if there's one spot to attack that you really want to attack in this Atlanta lineup, it's point guard, because Trae Young can't guard a broom. Like they do anything they can to conceal him on defense. So I like Mike Conley quite a bit. Looking at the other side of this game, if obviously the Bogdanovich and DeAndre Hunter news is important, part of me thinks one of them will sit. If Hunter sits, I'll be drawn to Cam. If either sit, I think there's merit to Cam Reddish at his price simply because of the volume. I think there can be merit to Danilo Gallinari for 3.6 on FanDuel as a GPP play. But if Bogdanovich sits, it's going to be really hard for me not to lock in Kevin Huerter. He is a very underrated per minute producer. I know that's Kyle's guy. And 3.6 on a slate like this, it just opens up incremental salary for you to kind of spend up and get a little more different. So I like Huerter a lot. if Bogdanovich is out, who, at 4.8 on FanDuel, Bogdanovich is kind of interesting too if he's in. He's probably a good bet for 30 minutes at 4.8. That's not the worst play in the world either.
Yeah, I think, we probably won't get the news on these Atlanta guys until after lock. So I think it's going to be important to be around to be able to late swap. If, we get Hunter or Bogdanovich out or both out, then that's going to open up some massive value. You guys touched on Herter, and I think Cam Reddish also would get a nice boost for me at just 3.8. Both Herter and Reddish guard forward eligible on DraftKings. And for me, Donovan Mitchell is just a fantastic play. I got to be honest. I know this is the theme for me on these shows now, saying that I'm not as familiar with FanDuel, but I'm just trying to be as transparent as possible. At 9.1 on DK and 1.2x on SuperDraft, this is a guy who's holding 36.1% usage, if I recall correctly, on the season. And obviously, Mike Conley has missed some time, but I think 8 of the 10 games or 7 of the 10 games he has played. So Donovan Mitchell's usage is just massive right now. He's shooting like 27 times a game over the last 3. And so against this Hawks team, you guys talked about how much they're giving it up really at all positions, just bleeding fantasy points and real points, certainly over their last 4 games. I have a lot of interest in Donovan Mitchell. How about some of the more like off the board plays here? Like I was kind of eyeing Royce O'Neal a little bit earlier, only power forward eligible now on DraftKings, but still, getting his 30 plus minutes still for this team. And has started to make some shots, and the stocks and the other peripherals have started to kind of come in. So, Kyle, would you look to Royce O'Neal kind of as a low-owned, high floor guy, obviously with 30-plus DK point ceiling?
Yeah, I don't mind him. I have him for 30 minutes tonight, so on DraftKings I do prefer him. I think on FanDuel I'd rather roll with Ingles, but yeah, on DraftKings I don't mind it at all.
Joe, anything else from this game that's kind of catching your eyes, maybe something that's going overlooked?
Not necessarily overlooked, but I definitely, especially on a site like DraftKings where you are rewarded for the 3-point bonus, I can't ever completely write off Bojan Bogdanović at 5.3. Obviously, most of the usage is going to funnel through Donovan Mitchell, but if Bogdanović comes out and hits 2 or 3 threes right away, they're going to keep feeding him. So I think as long as he maintains some volume and a couple of rebounds, like he could be a worthwhile play if you're MMEing with a stab.
Anything under the radar that we haven't mentioned yet, Kyle? Or are we good to move on to the late night hammer?
No, I think we're good.
Portland at the Los Angeles Clippers, another matchup that we've already seen in this young season. And I think everything in this game starts up top with Paul George. We've talked about him for months and the increased opportunity that he has this year in this Clippers offense with no Kawhi Leonard and no Marcus Morris, who is making his voice heard on Twitter today after that showing last night by his brother. We'll just say that, and I'll save the rest of my takes for the FTN NBA podcast tonight, who, by the way, I haven't seen him in chat in the last few minutes, but Dello going to be our guest tonight from the Listener League, following up the Easy B.
He's right there. He's here. I see him. He's here.
There he is. Talking about, I guess.
Oh no, because he was texting Damian Lillard, and Lillard said he's dropping 60, and
gotcha. I've seen a lot of Dame texting a lot of people in the FTN NBA Discord lately. It's pretty crazy.
Seems like lying to a lot of them too, apparently.
So here's actually what I want to do, because I didn't get too far into this game. We did just get a Sixers lineup. It's going to be Tyrese Maxey, Shake Milton, Furkan Korkmaz, B-Ball Paul Reed, and Andre Drummond. So let's circle back around to Philadelphia. I'm going to push a little rankings update. As I hinted at earlier, Paul Reed starting. I'm all about it. I believe 3-3 power forward eligible on DraftKings. He's 2x on SuperDraft. Paul Reed likely climbing to a double 10 in the rankings. It's still 28 minutes to lock. A lot of people are going to get there, but I think he's just somebody that now that he's starting, we want to get on top of the field. Pretty much regardless of the ownership, in my opinion. Joe, is that how you're treating Paul Reed at this point?
Yeah, 100%. Again, like it just every time, like he's a shooting guard on FanDuel.
Still?
Yes, like this just hasn't changed. But I actually like that more on this slate because now you look at like I'm all in on Paul Reed. Like he's a priority for me now. But then there's Andre Drummond, Bobby Portis, Giannis, and Robert Covington, who I'm also very high on, who we'll talk about later. Like I have to fade one of them now. So I'm probably going to end up being Covington, but you can't go wrong with Paul Reed on this slate.
Yeah, I mean, him getting into that starting lineup just raises that minutes floor. I would be surprised if we saw anything less than 20. And, this isn't Summer League, but we know what Paul Reed can do with a good minutes load on any given night. So really tough for me to get away from him now. Kyle, are you kind of in lockstep with us on Paul Reed or any other takeaways from that lineup? Obviously, Shake Milton also getting the start.
Yeah, I think it's a nice bump to Milton as well. Paul Reed, like the only issue that we really have with the guy is the minutes, right? He's always been a very good permanent producer, even in a limited time this year with some of these guys off the floor over 1.1 fantasy point per minute on DraftKings. So definitely no problem with Reed. On DraftKings, it's almost hard not to play him. But again, like that kind of goes back to my train of thought from earlier on in the show, where that's going to be contrarian by just doing something that doesn't really isn't going to be very popular. And that's what this path with now Paul Reed and then one of Paul George or one of Giannis, I think is going to be very popular. So potentially doing something different makes sense. But now you can also use Reed as kind of a way to double pay up, or maybe use Giannis and Paul George, or maybe one of those guys and Donovan Mitchell or something like that. I think there are plenty of ways to continue to get different. As for the FanDuel side of things for Paul Reed, like Joe mentioned, shooting guard eligible. That's just kind of crazy, but also makes him a much better play. Shooting guard is a pretty weak position today. So don't mind him on either site. I like him. And this, I had him starting anyway. So, I mean, I have him at about 21 minutes. So, but 21 minutes is really all he needs.
Another part that I don't think we really, any three of us touched on, Danny Green, not in the lineup. I was pretty high on him if he was going to get 30 minutes again at 4.2, even though he's only small forward eligible on DraftKings. He's also picking up 1.95x on SuperDraft. But I don't know, man. I'm getting cold feet on maybe playing any Danny Green. When's the last time this guy came off the bench? I think it was years ago, unless I'm just completely missing something. Joe, how are you treating Danny Green now?
It worries me now because Danny Green's not a guy that's going to come off the bench and dominate usage either, like at all.
Yeah.
He had close to 30 FanDuel points yesterday, and he only had 8 real points, so he relies on stocks and peripherals. I just don't like him off the bench whatsoever. It would be different. Like if Shake Milton were coming off the bench, I'd be totally fine with it because he's going to shoot a lot. He's going to command the ball. Like Danny Green's not a ball handler. He's not a high volume player. So bench naturally means less minutes than if you were starting. So like you take away minutes from someone that's already coming with like a somewhat of a cap ceiling, it's a little risky.
Kyle, would you prefer somebody like Georges Niang to Danny Green now that they're both coming off the bench?
Yeah. So I think this is kind of playing more into what I said about probably capping it at like one of Green, Niang, and Korkmaz now. I mean, I think you could potentially still make it 2, but I would probably lean more towards 1 now because now you're going to be using probably one of Maxey and Milton, Drummond, Paul Reed. So that's 3 Sixers right there. So now I think running 2 would obviously you can't do that on some sites, but probably limiting it to one of those guys. That way you're ensuring you're getting some of the better Sixers guys in your lineups. I would prefer, I would prefer Niang.
I think, I'm sure we will come back to this team once we get to questions here in a minute, but let's go ahead and jump back to that late night game, which will be the second game of the TNT doubleheader tonight. And I love having the TNT guys the night after Monday Night Football. We don't want a break and we don't get one. So Portland at the Clippers, we were talking about Paul George and his, awesome usage percentage this year. I mean, kind of down games, especially in the scoring department over the last 2, 9 of 22, followed up a very nice 4 for 20 game where he was 0 for 7 from 3. But the 3 games before that, 32, 32, and 42 real points. So we see the upside with a guy like Paul George when his shot is falling this year on this Clippers team. So, Kyle, are you prioritizing Paul George over Giannis? Because those are kind of the two big spend-ups today.
So I think it depends on kind of what else your lineup is looking like. I think if you're eating a lot of chalk elsewhere, I have no problem going to Paul George. And I think on DraftKings, I'd probably like to do it a bit more where they're a bit further in price. They're 900 in terms of difference on DraftKings. On Fanduel, they're about $500 in terms of the difference there. So I think I prefer George on DraftKings, but I don't think I prefer him over Giannis. I don't know. I'm kind of torn on it because I do think that the ownership is going to be heavily on Giannis. So that makes Paul George super interesting, especially if you're playing for, the kind of narrative where the game blows out or maybe Giannis doesn't get there. So I'll definitely have some Paul George, but as of now, I think I do prefer Giannis slightly.
Joe, I think you said this earlier, but just to confirm, Mr. Bucks is on Giannis over Paul George still? I mean, it's a decent discount going down to Paul George.
I know, and that's what I'm looking at right now. I think I am, but like the way I'm building right now, if I can get up, like if I can get someone significantly better in a 1v1 swap, if I go Paul George over Giannis, I might like what I'm toying with right now in my single entry. It was basically Giannis plus a $5,300 small forward or Paul George plus John Collins, which I know John Collins isn't in a great matchup by any means. But you got to think John Collins' ceiling over someone like a Nick Batum, a Terrence Mann, someone like that. It's a lot more enticing. But, like, in a vacuum, I have to choose Giannis. I know, like, the likely range of outcomes are probably similar, but the true ceilings are not at all. Like, Paul George does not possess Giannis' true ceiling tonight.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. So we did just get, touching on the Bucks once more. Same five for Milwaukee tonight: Holiday, Hill, Allen, Giannis, and Bobby Portis at the 5. So doesn't change anything from what we talked about with that team. So Joe, the rest of this Clippers team, pretty moderately priced. Guys like Ivica Zubac, Nick Batum, Terrence Mann prices coming up a little bit, but nothing crazy. So, you've got Eric Bledsoe down there at 4-3, still starting, playing mid-20s in minutes. He's a little bit interesting. Luke Kennard's still getting massive minutes for this team, and his shot's been falling at a really high rate, almost 48% from 3. Any of those guys kind of piquing your interest or standing out as a priority?
I like Terrence Mann quite a bit. 5-1 isn't a price we're used to paying for him, but the minutes make it worth it. He's seen 30-plus in 4 straight games, 34, which is a season second to a season high, which was 39 in the first game, but 34 last game at 17-10 triple-double. I also think Terrence Mann's defense could come in handy in this game with a two-headed backcourt. Like, Eric Bledsoe's not a bad defender, but he's far from what he used to be. So you have Paul George on one of them. I actually think Terrence Mann would be better off on someone like Dame than Eric Bledsoe. So I like Terrence Mann quite a bit. I don't mind. I actually, I'm looking at sub 4K value. I really don't mind, or sub 5K. I really don't mind Luke Kennard. Minutes are there. Is he volatile? Yes, but he's going to jack up a lot of threes, like at least 8 3-point attempts in 3 of his last 5 games. Like you said, he's shooting really, really well. It's just again, he's just very, very volatile. I don't mind Reggie Jackson. His shooting is coming around a little bit. He's still the number 2 scoring option on this team. I think his price is appropriate. I don't mind Eric Bledsoe, but I'm not just saying this because of my bias. I think there are other options around him that I would rather play. And Zubac is, on any other 3-game slate, I wouldn't mind him. But like the amount of center and power forward options, like you just can't play Ivica Zubac because then you're fading Drummond. You're fading a Drummond, a Portis, a Paul Reed, a Giannis, a Covington. Yeah. Like you're fading someone that is well worth their price compared to Zubac.
Yeah, and Zubac, somebody who I made a pretty big deal about on Sunday stream about Serge Ibaka being back and me not thinking that Zubac was good chalk, and then he backdoored into a nice little double-double for 33.
Yeah, I bet I hit his double-double at plus 330. It was nice.
Usually I cheer when you win, Joe, but not that night. Serge Ibaka up to 4, or actually I should say down to 4-1, still holding that power forward eligibility. Only 8 minutes in the opener, or not opener, his debut for the year. Isaiah Hartenstein also got 11 minutes in that game. So I'm kind of staying away from that front court, but Kyle, how are you treating the front court and then those wings that Joe talked about for the Clippers.
Yeah, so I also really like Terrence Mann. I think he's kind of on DraftKings anyway. He's kind of in a point where I still think he is at a good price, but not necessarily being extremely popular. Same thing for Reggie Jackson, except I don't really love his price as much. He's over 6K on both sites. I do think Bledsoe's a pretty solid play. I think, though, now with some of these Sixers guys becoming even more viable, it'll be interesting to see where the ownership falls with Bledsoe. I think if Bledsoe goes extremely just ignored because everyone's playing the Sixers wings, I think he could be one of the better value contrarian pivots. And then Nicholas Batum, I hate playing this guy, but he's 5'2" on DraftKings, and he's gonna be under 10%. So anytime someone I think is gonna play, I have him at 29.5 minutes. Like anytime I think someone's gonna play significant minutes and be under 10% on a 3-game slate, I think they're in play.
Mm-hmm.
So not a ringing endorsement for Batum, but he'll be contrarian.
Well, if we flip over to the Portland side, we talked about how many people in the Discord have been getting personal texts from Damian Lillard talking about how many fantasy points he'll score tonight. I didn't get a text from Dame himself, but I had a buddy just send me a GIF in the DMs of Damian Lillard. So I think a lot of people thinking it might be Dame time tonight here against the Clippers, still priced at 9-2 on DraftKings, and his other mainstays in this lineup, Yusuf Nurkic and CJ McCollum, certainly priced at a discount. Damian Lillard has not cracked 50 fantasy points on DraftKings so far this season. So is tonight the night, Kyle?
You would think the law of someone being due, it would ring a bell here for Damian Lillard, but I'm not sure. I definitely prefer Donovan Mitchell on DraftKings. I definitely prefer Donovan Mitchell on Fanduel, where they're kind of both similar. I think on DraftKings, I definitely prefer CJ McCollum for the $2,000 discount. So I probably won't get to Dame a whole lot. If Dame burns me, he burns me. But already though, Dame's always been someone who in DFS, sure, he can go out there and score 50 real points, and that's always a big threat for Dame. But he's also someone who does rely pretty heavily on scoring. So I'm typically okay with not being extremely high on if he's going to be popular anyway. And now you come into the fact that this year he's just not been a great fantasy producer. I don't think that'll continue. I think eventually he'll get better. But on a 3-game slate where, especially on FanDuel, where I have him at 35% projected ownership, I don't mind not really being there, especially with the guys around him. I prefer to use that salary. Obviously, you have to spend up a little bit more, but to get to one of the big studs, or like I mentioned, I prefer Donovan Mitchell. Then on DraftKings, I would prefer McCollum for the discount. So that's kind of where I'm at with Dame. I probably won't play him a ton tonight.
Yeah, I'm also very much on the side of saving 2K on DraftKings and playing CJ McCollum, who actually averaging 0.1 DraftKings points per game more than Damian Lillard. But we saw Dame 3 of the last 4, 25, 26, and 20 real points. So the shot's starting to fall a little bit, 6 of 14 from 3 in that last game, but didn't have the assists come along with it. So, the upside for the double-double bonus is there. Joe, how are you treating this Blazers team? I think you hinted at earlier maybe some Robert Covington love. So break down Portland for me.
Yeah. So on DraftKings, CJ McCollum's my favorite Blazer. I think 7-2 just in general is just way too cheap, especially for his role this year. I do like Covington quite a bit. I don't know if I'll get there on DraftKings, but I like him on FanDuel for 4.8 as well. I wrote about it in my value article today, and Alex and myself talked about it on stream on Saturday, Sunday, whenever it was. 2 things typically lead to Robert Covington's minutes being inflated, and that's 1, is he hitting his threes, and 2, is it a matchup where they need him? You look at over the last 3 games, his minutes have been at 30, 34, and 32. Over that span, he's 11 of 20 from 3. That's 55%. And you look at the matchup here, Portland's defense is not good. We know this. No one can stop Paul George, but their best bet at containing him, and the only player that can really go out to the perimeter with him, and also if he tries to post up, is Robert Covington. So he played. They put. This is their 3rd meeting this year, which I think is really weird. But only played 24 minutes in their first game against them. He did not hit a single shot from the field. So I do think his lack of efficiency could have led to him sitting on the bench a little bit more. But he did play 33 minutes last game against them. Had a pretty productive outing. Everything is kind of adding up for him, and he's only 4-3. Like, you don't need a ton to go right. You don't even need him to hit all his shots, especially in a defensive matchup like this where you can pick up a lot of stocks. I like Robert Covington quite a bit today.
Joe, cutting Tony Snell deep, talking about only Robert Covington can guard Paul George. Kyle Murray, how are you treating the rest of this Portland team? Are you high on Robert Covington as well? 4-3.
Yeah, so I like Covington on both sides. I actually don't mind Anthony Simons on DraftKings either at 3,800 if you were looking for like a sneaky pivot. I don't think he'll play a massive amount of minutes, but I think he can get it done. In a limited time, he's always been a pretty solid permanent producer. And in my opinion, on a short slate like this, you kind of are looking for players who can who the field aren't necessarily on, but can just get hot in terms of scoring or are good permanent producers. And Anthony Simons is that. Like, I think a lot of people are going to find the players that are going to play a lot of minutes and are cheap, but finding players that maybe aren't playing a ton of minutes and can get hot. I don't normally recommend that on a main slate, but on a 3-game slate, I don't mind doing a couple of different things to try to find some contrarian options. So Simons and Covington, I think, are fine. I also think Norm Powell's pretty interesting on DraftKings at 5,200. That price is just, in my opinion, too cheap for a 3-game slate and a spot where we know he has that ceiling. So if you're not playing Lillard or McCollum, going down to Powell instead of, I don't know, Tyrese Maxey or whatever, maybe just to get a little bit contrarian, I don't hate that idea.
I think a good point there on Norman Powell. 5-2 on the slates we've been used to, between 6 and 10 games so far this season. Maybe a little bit different story here on a 3-gamer at that price. So just gave him a little bump in the rankings because I think that's a great point. And Anthony Simons been fantastic this year. I mean, almost 50, 40, 90 at this point. He's shooting 49, 41 and has not missed any of his 7 free throw attempts. Any worry from either of you guys? And Joe, start with you. Just a quick question. We mentioned these teams playing twice already this year. Massive blowouts on either side. 30-point blowout in favor of the Clippers the first time. 19-point blowout in favor of the Blazers the second game. You think this one stays close? I mean, Vegas thinks that it's going to stay closer, right? 3-point favorites are the Clippers, but we've seen this matchup get out of hand twice already. Any worries there?
If you use Kyle's law of being due, I think we're due for a close game. But the thing is, if it is, you look at the Clippers side, they blow them out. You got to think Paul George has a hand in that. He has to look at the rest of the Clippers team. If you look at the other side, one of those two guards is probably going to have a big hand in it, and it's probably more likely to be McCollum as the season stands right now. But I think that only adds to the appeal of someone like Anthony Simons. If you are looking at the last 2 games, like Anthony Simons is a guard that will be out there in blowout time. So I like Simons quite a bit. But I'm not, on a 3-game slate, I'm not trying to get cute and like predict a blowout in a game that Vegas is not predicting a blowout. Like Vegas isn't necessarily predicting a blowout in the Bucks game, in the Bucks Sixers game, but I think that's a little more obvious than this game because you take this matchup last year too, obviously without Kawhi. I kind of think I lean that this game stays close 9 times out of 10. We've just had 2, I think, a little bit more outlier outcomes this season.
Sounds about right to me. Kyle, are we due? Are we due for a close game here?
Yes, we are. 100%.
Right. You heard them, folks. Anything from these 3 games that you two think that we overlooked, glossed over, or are we ready to jump into the questions?
I just hate 3-game slates.
Yeah.
It's just so ugly. Like, you're never happy with the lineup.
Shout out to the league for giving us good size slates for 3 straight weeks to start the season. And then really, really boning the Touts tomorrow with a 13-gamer. So maybe I retract my shout out for the league schedulers. Let's jump into some of the questions. And some of these I've given a little feedback on in the Discord, but I think a lot of them merit some discussion between us 3. 2v2, large field DKGPP. T-Panther saying he's trying to get really weird here. So Simons and Capella or Kevin Huerter and Yusuf Nurkic. Joe. He does have Trey weird. And Dame in the lineup.
That's weird. Trey and Capella correlate really well because they play so much pick and roll.
That's a good point. And
I just can't pull the trigger on Kevin Huerter until we know that injury information. So I would probably lean Simons and Capella.
Okay. Kyle, you differ at all there?
Nurkic's minutes have been weird too.
No,
been down?
I am. I agree. I think if we get some news where Bogdanovich or Hunter are out, then Herter gets a nice bump. Joe mentioned how my love for Herter. I was wondering where this hole in my heart has been, and it's because I haven't been able to play any Kevin Herter this year.
You hear those clicks? That's just that exposure going up right now.
Right, you can hear it. So guys that are priced really close at point guard here on DraftKings. So little 1v1 from P-Buck. Kyle, would you go Reggie Jackson or Drew Holiday?
Do we have any other? If you don't have Giannis, I would go Drew. Actually, either way, I would go Drew Holiday.
Same for me. Joe, are you going to shock us here by not picking him up?
No. I'm same here. I really have my trepidations with Drew on this slate. Like I'm really torn on what I want to do with him. But if it's in a vacuum, regardless of if you have Giannis, I have to go Drew over Reggie Jackson.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. And kind of a follow up that was interesting. Would you maybe prefer to just get up around $1,000 to CJ McCollum over those two in a tournament, or are you sticking with Drew? My answer was sticking with Drew. I think he's such a solid play, especially as you mentioned, Joe. If you're fading Giannis, I love getting Drew in there. Kyle, would you prefer to maybe get up to CJ, or are you fine sticking with Holiday?
I'd be fine with sticking with Holiday, but I think I would prefer to get to McCollum if possible, especially if you have Giannis in that lineup. But either way, I do think I would prefer to get to McCollum. I really do like McCollum a lot tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle, stick with you, the master of ownership. How owned do we expect Giannis to be tonight? Charge Up was saying he has a weird feeling he's going to be under-owned. I personally think he's going to get up there with how early that Paul Reed starting news came out. But what's the data saying?
So my initial gut was initially I was thinking that he might go a bit overlooked as well because of the potential blowout and all that good stuff. But now with the value opening, I have him at about 40-45% depending on the site and in large field stuff. So in the smaller field stuff, I do think he'll get up there. But I don't know if I would consider that overlooked. Like I think I have Paul George at like 28% on DraftKings. So I think Giannis will probably settle in around 50.
Joe, would you go Grayson Allen or Nick Batum in a single entry on DraftKings? I believe same price, 5.2.
That's tough.
Grayson's 5.1, excuse me.
5.1. I think that is relative. That depends how many bucks you have. If you already have Portis, like Giannis, and maybe Drew, I would not go $4 in this game. I think I lean Batum either way, to be honest. Grayson Allen's shooting out of his mind, but I don't expect it to keep up, and I don't expect his usage, like his volume, to be as high as it is. So I would actually go Batum, but it's very close. It's like splitting hairs.
Sure. I was also in Batum. Kyle, what do you think?
I would think Batum as well.
$3,500 left in the utility spot for Papa Wolf. He's in a high dollar single entry. What's the play there? I mean, I think for me, it's Paul Reed, but I'm going to assume he has Paul Reed already. Yeah. So 3,500, Kyle, where are you going?
I'm also going to assume he has Paul Reed. If it's not Paul Reed, if you don't have Paul Reed, that's an easy call for me. If you can find 100 more, I think I would prefer George Hill. If not, Danilo Gallinari is the best projected play for me under 3,500, not named Paul Reed.
I'm literally staring at Gallinari right now, just really terrified.
Well, there you go. Hopefully Papa Wolf can get back to us if he has Paul Reed or not. And hopefully he's tuned in so we can hear that. If not, we'll get to him in the Discord. This is not going to make you happy, Joe, so I'll start with Kyle. Tyreek's asking, thoughts on a full Bucks fade in large field GPPs on DK?
Full Bucks fade, I don't love it, but it's not the worst thing to do. I mean, like for me in my main lineup right now that I'm actually messing with, I'm trying to force Donovan Mitchell into the lineup because I do think he'll go a bit overlooked in comparison to where he is, and that does lead me off of Giannis, and it also leads me off of Drew Holiday. But I still have Portis and George Hill, so I don't know if I personally don't think I could do it, but I don't hate it.
Yeah, I think for me, I would be bullshitting everybody if I said I could full fade the Bucks when I have 3 guys ranked at 10s on DK. I think I would have to have at least one of Portis, Giannis, or Drew in all of my lineups if I was playing tonight. Joe, I know it pains you to talk about full fading the Bucks, but how would you approach that? Is that too crazy for you?
It's a little too crazy. I'm okay fading Giannis, but again, I think you need at least one buck. But the thing is now, like, I was flipping the coin back and forth on Giannis on DraftKings, but if Paul Reed's going to be his primary defender, I mean, that also makes me think Paul Reed, more so on Fanduel at 4-1 than DraftKings. There's a lot of merit to him being a bad tournament play. With that said, like, he opens up so much, and there's also a massive ceiling, so you can go either way. But in terms of full Bucks fade, I wouldn't full fade the Bucks. But I think, like, when you say fade the Bucks, you play one, that could be considered fading the Bucks on the slate.
Steelers fan chiming in, asking if it's okay. I would say Steelers fan and myself both sneaking out of Monday Night Football with a win. We won't talk about the officiating in that game. Is it okay for him to stack CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard, Joe?
Yeah, but I would want Paul George in that lineup.
Kyle?
I would say it's okay, but I wouldn't like to do it just because I would prefer to hope that CJ has this big ceiling game and then play somebody like Trae Young or like Donovan Mitchell or get up to Paul George.
Yeah, I think I side with you more, Kyle, on that. I don't think it's something I would prioritize, but like Joe said, I do agree. If you're going to do that, I would like to have Paul George coming back on the other side and thinking that Kyle is correct in his call that this game will be close and maybe even hoping for an overtime there. 2v2 here, Kyle. Paul Reed and Shake Milton or Grayson Allen and Bob Cobb?
The first one by a pretty good amount.
Joe?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I assume that those are either your second and third Sixers in the lineup or third and fourth. And I'm okay with 4 Sixers in a lineup, so I will also go on that first side. Anthony already reminded me today that the Spurs suck and then telling me that the Steelers got lucky. And let me tell you, Anthony, I don't disagree with you. Did either of you guys think that I don't know if you guys were watching that late, but did you think that field goal went in or hit the crossbar? Because I thought it hit the crossbar.
Wait, it didn't hit the crossbar?
No, it was like 10
Oh,
yards
really?
short. It was an optical illusion. Yeah.
I thought it did.
Wow. Even the announcer said it hit the crossbar. That's funny.
It was just a weird camera angle.
Wow.
Back on track here. George Hill or Anthony, Simons, Joe.
Give me Anthony.
Kyle?
I would take Hill, but I don't mind either one.
Kyle, Korkmaz or George's Niang for Easy B?
Korkmaz.
I agree. Joe?
Korkmaz.
All righty. We have half a minute until this first game locks. So it's been a pleasure, gentlemen. We'll type any answers to late questions into the chat so we make sure people get it. Any plans for tonight? Well, I mean, obviously, Joe will be recording with Dello in a little bit, but we're going to kick back and watch some games tonight, or you got other plans, Kyle? What's going on?
Yeah, gonna watch some NBA and some college basketball. I don't typically get into college basketball too much, but we got our new gold package at FTN Daily, so we have the college basketball product, and I've been degenning some college basketball apps today, so gonna be watching some of that too.
I'll tell you this: Mike Kutry was, I believe, 114 units in the green last season. So if you're buying into that gold package, make sure you check out the college basketball content. Him and Walter Waddell over there just going to have an awesome season. I believe those games tipped off half an hour ago, or is it in a half hour ago? At 8?
Start at 7. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to have to pull up multiple games here on the screens. My old D3 team also playing their second game tonight. Don't tell anybody, but they lost their opener to a team that was 0-18 last year. So tough start for my boys, but hopefully they will. I'm exaggerating. They had a new coach. They brought in some transfers. That it's a better team, but hopefully they also get back on track tonight. We'll talk some ownership before we get out of here, just because we have, Paul Reed, Andre Drummond, all those Philly guys. We were talking about those Bucks plays. So a $10 main GPP on DraftKings tonight, 450K with 100K up top. Oh boy, 2x crowns to all you DraftKings users that got in that contest tonight. You guys are rich. we, the new laptop. I've already got the ownership pulled up. We're ready to go. Kyle, since you don't have a Bean shirt on, who was the highest owned player out of this first game?
I'm gonna guess Furkan Korkmaz.
Furkan number 3.
Wow.
Joe, your guess.
Oh, Bobby Portis.
Bobby Portis number 1.
Let's
Barely
go.
squeaks out the number 1 spot over Andre Drummond by 0.17. Bobby Portis at 63% even. Andre Drummond 62.83. Furkan Korkmaz coming in at 355%. Nice little Sammy Hagar there. Giannis got up to 46.5. Followed by Shake Milton getting into that starting lineup at a discount off of Tyrese Maxey at 44%. D-ball Paul Reed, 32.5. I would gladly be well over that number and be happy about it at 3.3. Tyrese Maxey, 30. Drew Holiday, 25. Grayson Allen, 22 on the nose. George Hill, 12. Georges Niang, both Georges, also at 12. Danny Green off the bench held 7.5%, right alongside Pat Connaughton. 0.6% of people played Seth Curry. We appreciate those who gave us their money for free tonight. Also 0.01% Chris Middleton, just adding to the fun. Fellas, anything else before we get out of here? Joe, are the Bucks getting back on track tonight?
They are. I'm trying to contact Fanduel support right now, but they Bucks are getting back on track. Bucks by 14 is my guess. Not a crazy blowout, but enough to
I mean, that's a number. That's a number.
It is. Bucks by 14.
Kyle, how close is that Clippers and Portland game going to end up?
4-point game.
Ooh, they are due then. Wow.
Well, and here we go. Let's real quick, fellas. Just 60 seconds. DeAndre Hunter is out. Bogdan Bogdanovic is a game time decision. So for me, bump to Kevin Huerter, bump to Cam Reddish. I personally prefer Cam Reddish, but we'll see who gets the start. And obviously Bogdan being out would bring both of those guys into being fantastic value plays here. Kyle, what's your immediate takeaway from Hunter being out and Bogdan game time decision?
So I think if Bogdan ends up playing, he has a very, very good play on both sides, because I think people could potentially just be I don't think they'll be popular anyway, because so many people are going to have so many positions tied up from the first game. So I think whatever guy you think is going to be a strong bump, whether it's Reddish, Huerter, or Bogdan, are all going to be very good value plays. So I would really like getting those guys in my lineups. I guess if I had to rank them, I guess that's probably the best way to do it. If Bogdan plays, he's my number one. If he doesn't, I would prefer Reddish and then Huerter. But Huerter is actually $1,000 cheaper on Fanduel, so I might prefer Huerter on Fanduel and Reddish on DraftKings.
Joe, quick takeaways.
Well, I took a shot on Huerter, so I'm really happy with this right now. But I think if just Hunter's out, it's a benefit to both Huerter and Reddish. I also think it's a bit of a bump to Gallinari. So I think all three of those guys sub 4K are very viable, especially on a slate where you probably had one, maybe two viable sub 4K values in Paul Reed, and I consider Anthony Simons viable on the slate. So I think it makes a difference.
Yeah, I agree. Good stuff, gentlemen. I think that's going to do it for us. We'll be around in the Discord leading up to lock of both of these games that remain on the slate. Appreciate everybody tuning in once again on this Dream Stream Tuesday. Again, presented, as always, by SuperDraft Daily Fantasy. So that'll do it. For Joe, for Kyle, I'm Zach. For Thomas, our producer extraordinaire, behind the glass, as always.
Let's get these beats.
Good night.